As you know, there's an incredible amount of stuff happening in education at the moment. People are confused about what bit it matters and why is this happening, why is that happening.
In a tour of the country, NZEI Te Reo National Secretary Paul Goulter has been meeting with principals groups to share his view on what's happening in the schooling sector. He's encouraging these sector leaders to study the advancing reforms and to begin discussions about them with their schools and communities.
There is a major shift going on. It is occurring without what we would expect the full range of consultation and engagement with the sector more generally. We are basically saying as NZEI is that's the wrong way to create change inside the sector.
In this video presentation, Paul Goulter, along with a leading academic and a principals representative, join the dots between the pieces of reform and begin with the underlying ideology of the reforms.
This is an unusual statement, and it's a Treasury official writing to Bill English.
In the attached narrative, we have reflected your interest in competition being used to maintain competitive tension both within the state system between state schools and as a catalyst to innovate the state system itself via non-state alternative schooling models providing choice.
It's a rare insight. This demonstrates an appetite for competition in schooling, and that competition plays out in two ways inside the schooling system, that's between schools, but also the need to have alternative schooling models to create competition as a whole. And that latter point there is the one about the key driver for charter schools.
The Treasury input has not come without comment. In this document from 2011, the official explained the flaws in the competition agenda.
We do not recommend relying on competition for students as a key mechanism for raising student achievement. Systems that do create a more competitive environment in which many schools compete for students do not systematically produce better results in PISA score.
So this is if you like, the sceptical, the pushback of the officials against the minister, but being officials, of course, at the end of the day, what the minister wants happens. And here's how they see competition could be introduced into New Zealand schooling.
Competitive environments are characterised by policies such as abolishing enrolment zones, introducing voucher schemes and using charter schools.
Official information reveals that ideas floated soon hardened into a strategy. Various pieces of work began on a range of fronts, and by March 2014, most of the strategy is well into play. But while the strategy came from the Ministry of Education, the plan upon which it was based emanated from Treasury.
This is the Treasury view of it, and the reason I identify it for you is because you can see where the driver for this is coming from.
As the plan is rolled out, there are a few major elements that are critical to success.
So there's three leading pieces of work here, and I don't think you can understand any one of these pieces of work without understanding what's going on with the other two, and you certainly can't understand what's happening in education in New Zealand without getting to grips with these three pieces of work. These are the first order issues, and these drive the other changes. So people say, well, what about educans? And very critically important what's going on inside educans, and that the profession pay attention to that. But it's actually as a second order issue, and it is designed to drive the planning and the thinking that's been driven out of these three areas. So this one here has gone right under the radar, and unfortunately that's the case because this is the big picture. This is the big one. It's been sold as clearing clutter from the operating environment. Remember, it was to get rid of red tape. That was the spin that was put on when this was announced. This is Murray Jack's group, which has got a limited participation from the sector. Came out of the National Act deal, the Teapot deal, which introduced charter schools. This was the other part of that, the education aspect of that Teapot deal. And it somehow or another moved from being a comprehensive report on governance issues into a comprehensive review of the Education Act. And this is the cutting edge. You can't move the system unless you move the Education Act. This is out of the Cabinet paper, And it's hard to see in there where decluttering your operating environment comes from. Now, I urge you, and I think you've got to go onto the Ministry website and get hold of the Cabinet paper on this. And in it, you'll see the basis of what this is about. These are the carve-outs from what they're not allowed to go near. They're not allowed to litigate the underlying intent of tomorrow's schools. Okay, it doesn't say litigate tomorrow's schools model. It's the underlying intent. But you can reshape New Zealand's education system without shifting the underlying intent of tomorrow's schools. They're not allowed to look at matters that are currently the subject of the government's education initiatives, and in case you missed it, they're not allowed to look at national standards reporting, ending school types, creating new ones, so charter schools are off the radar with it, and obviously the expenditure one, which would be reasonably typical in this. The group has to produce this interim report by the end of May, final report by the end of June. That report will then form the basis of that review of the Act in 2015. So that's why this group's really important, because it'll set the parameters, if you like, of that review. So therefore you have to look closely at the working of that group, and one of the first areas of concern is the 2-week public consultation, the first couple of weeks in April. Now, the government might say, oh well, but next year when the review's on, you'll get your chance to have your real input on it. But as you know, it's what you shape up front is the driver on this.
It would have been great to see some of our sector leaders being able to keep us well informed and asking us as they go through, bit by bit by bit, where do we stand, what's our opinion on it, is it going to move our sector forward, what sort of conversations do we need to have. I think it's important that our parent communities know and understand that this is happening, and I truly believe at the moment they don't.
This is my summary, all right? A new schooling system reflecting that ideology of choice, competition, and then the associated new governance models. So, Task Force is going to look at governance through the medium of changing the Education Act.
The changes to the Education Act around school governance is a ploy for deregulation. We've seen it operate across the state. The end result is a competitive market driven ideology which makes business units out of schools or prisons or hospitals, whatever the agenda has been applied to, and essentially it's using deregulation as a way to force into a system a more market driven approach to what this government considers a business. Education is business.
Now this one here is the one that people have been agitated about. Recognise it is political. That announcement was absolutely political in January. It was rushed up from February as far as we can ascertain. Education is a major negative for this government, and this government has decided it needs to shift that to at least neutralise it.
The analogy would be the All Blacks. You know, they're the #1 rugby team in the world, but they still bring in the scrum coaches, they still bring in the outside expertise, they still use their expert and lead players to mentor and develop their up-and-coming players.
The creation of the super roles are not, as the media would have us believe, about rewarding teachers for what they're doing in the classroom. They are about creating new classes of management, and the extra money is for those roles. It's not about rewarding teachers for the work that they are currently doing in classrooms. It's not about rewarding better teachers. What's also clear is that the kinds of teachers that will be recruited into lead teacher positions are those teachers who are doing well at delivering national standards achievement results in literacy and numeracy. So we're not going to end up with lead teachers providing advice around the rich curriculum.
NZEI's response to it was, at the time we just said, no, we think you're asking the wrong question here. We think the right question is what's necessary to move New Zealand's education system. Therefore, out of the evidence, what are the key levers we need to drive with this? Most of the other sector groups, after they've been briefed through the medium of the cross-sector forum, which we've pulled out of, said that it's great. We said it's not focusing on the real movers in education. Interesting, most of those other groups have moved to where we are. This high quality, low equity stuff's really important. We think this inequity space is the one that we should be focusing on. Just some of the PISA stuff that you don't hear, you know, and you hear it's been drummed up as we're plunging down the PISA league table and our system's in crisis and all that sort of stuff. The argument that we've got is in fact that the increasing inequity in New Zealand society is now starting to grab school performance or school system performance in a way that it hasn't before. And so whatever you've been doing in your schools, collectively and individually, is now being overwhelmed by that increasing inequality and inequity.
Figures from the 2012 PISA report show that in math, variance in scores as a consequence of parental socioeconomic status has jumped from 18% to 23% since 2008. Once all socioeconomic measures are factored in, the variance figure jumps to 78%.
So 78% in variance in PISA maths lies in out-of-school factors, what the child brings to the school. And just by way of comparison, you can see where Australia is. And Australia has very high levels of inequality, just as we do on, in OECD figures. We're right down the back of that particular league table. So that inequity stuff is starting to grind into the system. The other part about the new roles stuff, NZEI has been doing a lot of work in the long-term work strategy, which this government canned, around the thinking about what new roles could exist in education, and we're working carefully through that. We managed to make some progress with the ASET teacher, and that took 9 months of battering to get them to agree to that. This part here is really important. This is the bit, again, that the sector can get snowed on. Again, go to the cabinet paper in order to carry these conversations with people that you need to. When it was sold to the cross-sector forum, it was sold like this. The sector's going to get a chance to shape these roles. We're flexible in design.
We want to develop these changes with input from the sector, are open to changes to the design detail and will provide opportunities for discussion.
That flexibility has turned out to be extremely limited. Only the details of the roles are up for discussion and no broader issues can be broached.
There is no flexibility around these new roles. The Prime Minister has said this is what it will be and this is what it will be. And it is a snow job for people to run around and say that the sector is going to have an influence on it. They've set up the working group and the secretariat. The working group is the usual hand-picked groups from the Minister. The secretariat is NZEI, PBTA and STAR. So this is about the management staffing side of it. We've done the governance, now we're doing the management and the staffing side of it. And absolutely abhorrent that this is being done in the way it's being done without a full-on consultation with the sector. By that I mean communities and parents as well as inside the school gates.
From what we can see at the moment, we will be put into specific clusters. Are they geographical? Are they just based on your student achievement? Are they based under the priority learners? We don't know. The danger with doing that is we're going to lose some of those really good quality conversations that promote student achievement across the board, that promote leadership across the board. We have some absolutely brilliant conversations at the moment. Are they going to be limited because I'm going to be in one particular cluster talking about just my student achievement under the national standards?
One of the other worrying aspects about the new class of managers placed across schools is that they provide a much greater possibility for the Ministry of Education to control what's happening in schools and to make sure that the national standards agenda and everything that it stands for is implemented thoroughly across the country.
Bit of news on this lately, the Herald on Sunday running that stuff. The italics comes from that transcript of that Herald interview.
I don't want to preempt an outcome, but I am interested instead in focusing on looking more towards what are the educational outcomes that we are trying to achieve. How do we create more incentives that are focused on delivering improvement as well as outcomes? But when this kid came into my classroom at this point, and now at this point, what learning difference can I absolutely see has occurred as a result of my teaching?
The progress they have made?
Yeah, the consistency and progress.
So just when you thought the PAC tool had gone away, you can see how that fits into it.
If you're going to fund through schools, you have to work out which school gets more money than other schools.
Well, you've got to work out which school is delivering achievement.
Performance pay for schools.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's complicated.
What she's crafting up here is what the Americans call value-added modelling.
What we've had for many years in this country is the notion that you fund schools based on need, and based on the notion that children who go to schools without the social and cultural capital of children who go to wealthier schools deserve a hand up from the state. Now, what you get with the notion that you can reward schools based on achievement is you will end up with richer schools getting richer and poorer schools getting poorer.
So you get rid of decile rating. What comes in its place? Is it around student data? For example, is it around your new entrant data? Targeting that group of children as they move through. Well, there's lots of variance within that data. What about schools that have high transient populations? How do you track that data? How about tracking the data here where we have a number of children who come in from overseas that start school in their home country at 7?
Treasury was promoting the use of funding as an engine for change as early as 2011. It proposed a timeline of preparation, including greater access to value-added data, increased accountability and total resourcing. The suggested measures for 2014 seem to be well on track.
This is my view. I reckon this is how it all joins up. This is why I think it's really important to understand all the moving pieces. Sort out your governance, sort out your management, get better measurement, market signals, as we say, use the money to drive the changes, ram them home, and have an alternative voice sitting out there that's going to incentivise the change you're trying to do internally. And that's why they don't have to have many charter schools, they just have to have enough to make people think, In terms of NZEI, our National Executive looked at this. The first part of it is we need to keep the inequity piece right in front of people, that this is the go-to place. You've got to do something about that. Those out-of-school factors are so huge now that the rest of it you're basically making it up if you think you're going to drive system change. We've got to see the evidence. This question of transparency, absolutely critical. You folk would have no idea about what's going inside those working parties and Secretariat because everyone's bound to secrecy. Absolutely ridiculous, major system change, and you can't get your hands on papers that are directly affecting you personally, your role, your school and your community. It's not collaborative with the profession for obvious reasons, and we're just not copying national standards. And when we raise the national standards piece, look, we know that's out there. You've got to realise it's government policy. Can we just park it for a while, and get back to this other work?